Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at setting up a basic launch control within our Link G5 and G4X systems. So this would be if you have a naturally aspirated engine, supercharged engine, you want to do a basic launch control at the drag strip to have repeatability and consistency with your launch. So launch control allows us to be stopped, stationary, vehicle's not moving. We can simply go in, clutch in, go full throttle. Doesn't even necessarily matter if you're clutched in, but clutch in, full throttle. It'll hold you at the limiter that you program. And then as soon as you start to have the vehicle move, so you let the clutch out, the vehicle starts to move, the launch control shuts off, and it gives you that repeatability. Instead of trying to go, let's say you're at the drag strip and you're at the tree and you're going to be having the lights starting to drop, instead of trying to hold your foot at, let's say, 4,000 RPM and kind of feel out and not allowing the car to move forward and trying to balance that clutch and the pedal and keeping the foot consistent enough so that the launch RPM is consistent and then stomping the throttle down to actually launch the vehicle, that can be very challenging. Launch control takes that balancing act out of the equation, and it gives you a lot of consistency and repeatability with the launch. All right, let's take a look at how we can set this up. We're going to move from our fuel area right here, and in our layouts, we're going to go up here to the page labeled LC. This is going to be where we program launch control. So this is going to be for the rolling anti-lag, the launch control, and even some more advanced launch control programming. We're going to go through some more advanced launch control programming in the next few tutorials. This is just sticking to the most basic things, the most basic details that we need to pay attention to. So what I'm going to do right now is go here in my screen, and we're going to go into our area here called launch control. We can see that right here. We're going to go to our launch mode, and we're going to go from off, and we have some selections to make here. We have a single launch RPM. We have 3D launch RPM. Latched launch RPM are disabled. Well, in this case, we're going to be choosing single launch RPM. We're going to be keeping this a basic launch control. The 3D launch RPM table is something we're going to go through in the next tutorial. This gives you the ability to use launch control as a means to control the acceleration in first gear and then transition into traction control. This is, again, more of a complicated way to go about this. We're going to talk through some strategies in that next tutorial of how to take advantage of this for a vehicle that is traction limited in first gear. The reason why we might want to use this instead of traction control is that traction control calculates everything based on your wheel slip, or the difference between your front and rear wheels, the driven versus undriven wheel speed. So if the wheel slip, let's say at launch, is a couple 100%, we really can't implement traction control. It's problematic. That's where we use a launch control table, like our 3D launch limiter table here, to go about allowing us to control the acceleration rate, essentially not allowing the car to go into wheel spin in typically first gear. And then once we click into second gear, where traction is much better, we can rely on the traction control to take over and do the work and have a proper calculated slip amount. That's getting ahead of ourselves right now. We're going to be talking about this in the next training module. Then we have a latched launch RPM. This is going to be for the rolling anti-lag. So if you have a turbocharged engine and you want to build boost, let's say as you're driving, maybe third, fourth gear, you have a laggy turbo, you could initiate a latched launch control, or rolling anti-lag as it's known, and it allows you to go ahead, go full throttle, and build a ton of boost. As soon as you let go of a momentary button, it lets go of the latch limiter and immediately slingshots the car and accelerates extremely quick. So this is something we'll cover in another tutorial. Disable is going to just disable the launch limiter from working, but allows our tables to still be present so we can see what's going on with this. Right now, we're going to select single launch RPM. That's all we need for naturally aspirated or a supercharged engine. You could even implement this for turbocharged if you want to keep something really simple for a launch limiter. Let's go ahead and click OK. So this is where we're going to find all of the launch control programming within this window. We have a lot of things to set up. So let's talk about the very first thing we have here. That's going to be our activation control. Right now, this is set to off. Activation control can be set here to always on. And if it's set to always on, it'll just take a look at the disarming speed here. This is how I'm going to show you how to set everything up for this training module. So essentially, we have a hands-off launch control. The only thing you have to have is a speed sensor wired into your link, and that's based on your driven wheel speed. The driven wheel speed would be a speed source that's not powered by the drivetrain. Now, technically, we can get around this by doing a little bit of a cheat. I'll talk about that here in a second, but this is going to be the configuration that we'll find ourselves in if we want to do the launch control and we don't have a clutch switch. Now, if we do have a clutch switch, let me talk about that real quick. we're going to find under the activation control here, we would set it to the digital input we're using for our clutch switch. And if we do this, let's just put it to our digital input 1 here, for example. Actually, let's do digital input 3. We're going to find right now we have our pull-up resistor on, activation state low. This would be assuming you have a clutch switch and you have one leg of the clutch switch wired into the ground chassis source. The other leg of the clutch switch is going to go ahead and ground your digital input 3. And then in this case, we have our latching feature turned off. The clutch switch should be a momentary on or off switch. So if we push the clutch in, it's on, come off the clutch, it's off. So this configuration here would tie the launch control to your clutch switch. And then in that case, we would very likely want to go ahead for the disarming speed and set this to something like 0 mile per hour. So I'm assuming if you don't have vehicle speed, in order to make this work, you have to have a clutch switch. And in that case, if you don't have a vehicle speed source, or speed source, I should say in general here, you'll set this to 0 mile per hour. So it ignores the disarming speed completely. But in this case, we want to keep this relatively simple and not based on a clutch switch. We want to base it on our actual speed from the vehicle. We're going to go here to activation control and set this to always on. Now we take a look here at our disarming speed. I'm going to go ahead and set this at 4 mile per hour. That's usually a good speed to be able to turn off the launch control, 3-4 mile per hour. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.